Hey, John, I want to talk about last week. Actually, I don't want to talk about last week. I want to talk about this week, but we had a great episode last week and it kind of dovetails into this one a little bit, kind of a cousin episode. But because my memory is not that great from like a week later, help me out. What did we talk about last week?
So last week we talked about discipline, and the
Yes.
take on it, which I thought was really interesting, was if we do discipline well, if we have to do it and we do it well, it builds the culture. If we
Yes.
do it poorly, it defeats the culture. Now, there's a
I love
whole
it.
legal aspect, and we talked about that last week. Go back and listen to last week's episode, but it really was taking a legal case and talking about discipline in the workplace. And if we do it well, it supports the organization. And so we tried to give you the steps. And Chuck, in the notes last week, you gave us this great checklist that people can use,
Yes.
right? And so kind of looking at that and doing that becomes important. And this is Chuck's weekly plug of the book. Kind of getting in there. So what do we want to talk about today, Chuck? What's the topic? What are we going to talk about?
Yeah. So, what we're going to talk about, John, is why documentation matters. And it's like, there are probably people right now that are being like, wah, 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 but listen, are you listening to me? Because,
I, am I supposed to be
John,
listening to you?
you're
Yeah.
supposed to be listening to me here.
Okay, got it. I'm listening.
I'm going to say three words today
Okay.
that may make some managers roll their eyes. Document, document, document. Again, wah, wah, here we go. But
Can
listen,
I just jump in here? I'm thinking about when I was a middle level manager at a big corporation, and HR is like, you have to document their performance. You got to document their performance. You got to document their performance. Yeah, sure. Right. You want me
well,
to do that on top of other 500 other things they want me to do here? I get it now. I understand it now. I understand the importance of it. But boy, it is hard if we're not explaining why documentation is good. And I think Chuck's going to do that for us today. But we got to do that with our managers and leaders to make sure they understand.
sure. I had something happen to me just a few weeks ago that reminded me why I'm almost evangelical about this. You see, someone from our corporate office had a question about an employee we had moved from full time several months ago. We actually moved them to full time. They were part time,
Okay.
and we moved them to full time. And there's a window when someone can elect those benefits. Well, that employee never enrolled in benefits. And so then I got an email with a question. Did we tell him he was eligible, and did we give him an opportunity to enroll? And for that brief moment, and I'm thinking, look, I know we did. Did we? So I went back through my emails, and bam, there it was. We had told him his transition to full time was complete. He had 30 days to select benefits, and he should come to HR if he needed help. I found the email,
Oh,
John.
yeah, it's great.
I'm telling you, John, when I find documentation like that, it is the sweetest nectar of employment litigation defense. This wasn't even litigation, but I could answer the question from the corporate office immediately, and I knew we had done what we were supposed to do.
That feels
Ah,
so wild. It's the
yeah,
first time Chuck's done something right.
yeah.
Right, yeah. No, and I think, again, right, I love that sweet nectar, but I do think, right, I kind of lived that through you. I could see you going, oh no, did we do that? Oh, we did.
Yeah,
I'm going to
no,
send that off because, I don't know if this was in your mind, but in my mind, I would have been like, oh gosh, if I didn't, that means a lot more work for me.
it's horrible. Oh,
Right,
geez.
all this work, all this thing, and then the trust that I have with corporate office goes away, right? And so there's all these
Yes, yes,
ramifications. And to be
yes,
able to go, yeah, I did it. I love
yeah. I'm like, hell yeah.
it. Hell
Oh,
yeah.
that was great. Yeah. So, look, exactly. Good documentation is not just something we create because we are afraid of being sued, though, or afraid of looking bad, but it does let people who are not in the room understand what actually happened.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I
So,
think that's a good point, right? Getting that in there and making sure. And I love that kind of that viewpoint of like we're allowing people to understand that we're in the room, right? And so if we leave or that person leaves or that person's not there, we have that documentation, or somebody from the outside goes, I want to know why you did this. You're like, well, this is why we did it. Yeah, I love
yeah.
it.
And Eric Meyer's ADA point, Eric Meyer from the Employer Handbook, folks, I need to tag him in some of our LinkedIn
Yeah.
posts to get him engaged because we keep plugging him all the time, and he's the inspiration for some of our items. We just dig a little deeper, and I kind of try and take a piece of what he said and think, how can we use this? And so, in this regards, we've been trying to make the workplace better. And that's what we've been doing with some of our more recent stories, not just compliance, John, document, document, document. So that's why this recent piece that attorney Eric Meyer, it caught my attention. Eric writes that employer handbook again, and I love his stuff because he takes serious employment law issues, makes them readable. And his piece on ADA turning 36 years old and kind of where those ADA cases are won or lost today. His point is that since Congress broadened that ADA definition of disability through the ADA Amendments Act, employers generally should not spend all their energy arguing over whether somebody is disabled enough. The more important question is what happened next. Did the employer engage in the accommodation process in good faith? And can the employer show what it actually did? And Eric puts the focus on that interactive process, emails, the documentation, the consistency, and whether the employer can support an undue hardship decision with real facts rather than a hunch.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're going to talk about this later, Chuck, but one of my favorite checklists that we have in the book, The Ultimate Guide to HR, is the interactive process. In fact, I use it in my classes, right? Because it's
Yeah.
so thorough and it's such a good thing. And you put on the back of this checklist, these are the things you need to train your managers on. And you have a list of all the things you need to train them on.
Yeah.
And it's so thorough and it allows anybody in any organization, whether you're HR of one or you have no HR expertise or you're a department of 5, you can look at this and go, all right, this is what I need to do in the interactive process. I'm going to follow that. And we talk about documentation. We talk about all the important things in it. And so I love that. I read that article from Eric. I thought he did a good job kind of summing that up and doing that. And when we think about that definition, right, that definition of a person with a disability who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one of their major life activities, it's an important definition. We need to know it. We need to do it. But it does cover a lot of different areas.
Yeah. So, as you have pointed out in the past, a lot of managers want a yes or no answer immediately. But the process is often more important than a quick answer, right?
Yeah,
So they want,
absolutely.
I want to know, what should we do? And that's probably the toughest part of my job when it comes to this aspect of the job is, whoa, slow down. There's a process. Oh, Chuck's dragging his feet. I'm like, look, there's a process. And the EEOC, say it, John, EEOC.
The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
Exactly. The guidance that they provide backs up the process piece. When the right accommodation isn't obvious, the employer is supposed to make a reasonable effort to identify one, usually by talking with the employee. That's a novel idea, right? Hey,
What?
talk to the employee about options that would allow them to perform their essential functions. If the employer says something would create an undue hardship, the analysis looks at things like cost and resources and size and operational impact. So if we make a decision today and someone examines it 6 months or 2 years from now, what will they see? Will they see a real process, or will they see a one-line conclusion that basically says, oh, we can't do that?
I can't do that. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I couldn't do it, Chuck. I
Yeah.
couldn't do it.
And that's sometimes the answer. We
So I
can't do
so
that, Chuck.
I think that what you're summing up there and what you're saying is the ADA interactive process is all about documentation, right? And it's about being able to look back and go, what did they decide 6 months ago?
Yeah.
Right? Not what did I decide because maybe I wasn't here, or right. And we started this episode, and I don't know if you meant to do that. You probably did because you're a genius about like, oh, I don't remember what we talked about last week, John. What did we talk about, right? And how many times are we're in the office and somebody asks us something in the afternoon that we did in the morning, and we're like, I don't know. And that's where that documentation is critical to be like, okay, I need that documentation. I need to do it.
Yeah, it's huge. But I do want to point one thing out and make one distinction very clear. Documentation does not fix bad HR decisions, right? You can document a terrible decision perfectly. And I just love that quote. You can document a terrible decision perfectly.
I
I got
love
to
that.
work.
That
I
should be
want
a
to work
social
on that.
media clip,
Yeah,
Chuck.
yeah. Thank you. I actually want to work on that phrase. That I like that. I'm gonna put that back in the craw here and
Yeah. I
regurgitate
like
it
it.
around
You
it.
can
But
document a terrible decision perfectly.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, great.
yeah,
Thanks for doing that. At least we know what you did wrong.
yeah. So maybe that should be the title of this episode, Samantha, our producer. But hey, listen, what we want is three things with
Okay.
documentation. We want a good process, we want good judgment, and we want good documentation. When it comes to these things, that's the rule. Good process, good judgment, good documentation. The documentation should capture a thoughtful decision, not try to manufacture a defense after the fact.
Yeah, you don't want to be like, wait, they're here. Let me write this down like I think it happened. You do it in the moment. You kind of do that in there, kind of get in there and look at that and see that there. All right. So, what scares me more, Chuck? No documentation or poorly written documentation? Oh, let me think about that. I don't. Gosh, both of them scare me. Now I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight. I'm gonna have nightmares. I'm gonna say with poorly written documentation, right? Because when there's no documentation, it's kind of simple, straightforward. There's no documentation, there's no there. But bad documentation can take me down so many wrong avenues that can get me in trouble. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's kind of like, which way, how you want to die, quickly or slowly? I don't know. I mean, it's like, that's the danger. If the documentation is emotional, retaliatory, sarcastic, inconsistent, simply wrong, now you've created exhibit A, John, for the
Yeah,
other side. So document everything does not mean write anything you want. So we got
I like
to
that.
really, document everything does not mean write anything. So I got another example for a real world story. Let's just call it the no call, no show. For my
No
own,
call, no
yeah,
show.
yeah.
Hello,
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 hello, who's
hello. Are you
there?
coming in today?
I no call, no show. I no call, no show. So here's another example from my own HR life. Manager comes to me, wants to terminate an employee for a no call, no show. He says, this is the second time. Okay, wow, what happened? second time in 30 days, this person just didn't show up to work. I'm like, wow, okay, what happened the first time? He said, well, we sat down, we talked to him, we gave him a verbal warning. So I asked, did you document it? Did you write it down? Did that person did they sign it? Did they, what exactly did you tell him? Did you tell him that another no call, no show could result in termination? Look, we're in Florida here. Many of you are in right to work states. Could we have terminated someone? Sure. But you really need to lay out in the
By right to
documentation
work, he means employment at will states.
My gosh.
Just to correct. Just to correct, make sure that we don't make that mistake. Right to work is different than employment at will. Right to work is a union thing.
You're right. I did that on purpose. Employment at will. So, anyways, we really need to lay out the consequence. So, there's nothing. There's no documentation. I look in the employee's attendance. I go back at least 8 months, go back to the beginning of the year. The person's a 3-year employee. Other than those two situations, perfect attendance, day after day, week after week, month after month, is in it and I'm talking clocking in at the exact same time, clocking out at the exact same time, takes the bus to work an hour each way. It couldn't have been a more perfect attendance record. Could the company have terminated him? Right, because we are employment at will, possibly. But from an HR risk and fairness standpoint, I didn't like that gap. And the first event had not been properly documented. I really could not show that the employee had been clearly told what the consequence could be.
So let me ask you this question, Chuck. I need more information. Before I weigh in on this, I need more information. So is your policy at your company that if a person does not show up or does not call for one shift, there is possible termination?
No, that's the thing. It's not. If it's but 2 and no call, no shows, sure. Now you're showing a pattern, but something you always say, John, is what's going on? What happened? This person had perfect attendance. What is going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's right. It's a feedback loop, and if we're not paying attention to it, be like, whoa, wait a minute, you've been great up to this point. Why did it? Yeah, and so again, I think everyone that's listening needs to go back and look at their no call, no show policy to see what it says. Is it 1 shift? Is it 2 shifts? Is it 3 shifts? Typically, I use 3 shifts, just in case anybody's looking at me. And so that's the one I'm looking at, right? 3 shifts. And so if they don't, and again, did they not call? Did they not text? Did they not communicate? Well, that's odd. What's happening with this employee? And seeing that as feedback to be like, something's happening here. Let's think about that. And this is where I start wondering about the manager's motivation.
Okay, so I've got another layer here. Manager, I had the man, basically, at the end of the day, I had the manager issue a final written, and so now the expectation is clear. Now the employee knows the seriousness of the issue and what could happen next. And then the manager said, well, his performance stinks too. Didn't use the S word, but not stinks. Okay. and
I see.
Yeah, great.
PG podcast here.
I'm like, okay, great. Show me the performance documentation. Let's take a look at when you've talked about their performance. And guess what? There wasn't any of that either. My answer was basically, get up and get going on this. If there's a performance problem, manage it, coach it, document it. Don't wait until you want to fire somebody and suddenly tell HR about 12 months later, right, of that he's got terrible performance, even though they've had perfect attendance.
Well, you can have perfect attendance and still have bad performance. I will just say that. But here's my problem with this scenario is that we allow managers to get away from this, right? We don't discipline the manager. My point of view, if I'm a leader in the organization and I find out that my managers are not doing performance, guess what? They're getting called into the office and we're going to start the progressive discipline on them. One of the expectations of this job is that you document your employees' performance. You have not done that, and therefore you're going to suffer the consequences, meaning you're going to have to deal with that employee. And two, you're going to be written up. I know that may seem harsh, but a lot of times we allow managers to get away with it because, oh, I'm too busy. I'm too this. Well, they're too busy because they're not focusing on the right things.
Yeah.
Sorry, managers.
And that's okay. And my job is to ultimately protect the company also. So anyways, listen, I think there are three different things that documentation does to us. And if if you know of anything else, jump in. But first, it confirms what we did. My benefits email, that was huge to me. Second, it creates the foundation for the next decision. No call, no show. If the final word, and it clearly documented the conduct, what's the expectation? What's the consequence of another occurrence? And third, documentation shows how we get the decision. And that's where the ADA example is so important. If an employee asks for an accommodation, the record should show the request, the discussion, and some options considered, and was it selected and rejected and why, and all that great stuff.
Yeah, I think that's all good. Here's what's going through my head, Chuck, and this is probably something that I was challenged with when I was a young leader, young supervisor, young manager, that documentation process. Right? Because I got better at it as I grew, that I would have literally a file on every employee and I would be like, oh, I need to write they're doing really well with this project and this kind of stuff. And I would stuff it kind of in there. But I think helping our managers and helping our supervisors actually with the documentation process, what does it look like? How much information do we need? How much specific does it need to do? Can be really beneficial because I think as a new supervisor, people are like, HR is always like, document, please document.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, okay, I'm documenting, but what does good documentation look like? What does great documentation look like? How do I keep that comprehensive so I can go to an employee and kind of like, okay, here's all the documentation I have.
Okay, so let me try and answer that. And there's no clear cut black and white answer here, but my kind of general rule on documentation, and by the way, exactly what you just said, exactly, okay? But good documentation doesn't have to be long. It has to be useful. My rule is write it so someone who wasn't in the room can understand it a year from now. Sometimes I say we're going to write it so when the judge reads it or the jury reads it, they know exactly what happened. What did we know? What did we say? What did we do? What did we tell the employee? What happened next? If the record answers those questions, Johnny, you've closed a lot of gaps.
I love those questions, and I think you could give those questions to a new supervisor to say, I need you to document your conversation. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions, 6 questions you can answer.
There's another little checklist.
Right. And a little checklist, a little like, boom, this is the questions you're going to answer. This is what we're going to do because it's going to help them. Right. And so again, you build that skill set over time by getting feedback from HR people and that kind of stuff. And you get really good at it. Right. And like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And some people are going to be very fact driven, and then other people will be a little more narrative. It doesn't matter as long as when I read that, I can be like, okay, I know what happened.
Yeah. So if we could kind of, we've talked about the interactive process, but I want to, I want to talk a little bit about audit secure, not audit proof. Okay.
Wait, did you say audit secure?
I did. I didn't make that up. Who made that up, John? Who gave us that?
That is from our friend Lisa Smith of the Great Help Desk, one of the best tools in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the social media clip right there. The Help Desk, I talk about this all the time. It is one of the best tools for HR department of one, because you have a person in your corner. You have a senior certified HR professional that's going to answer your emails, get in there. But Lisa talks about Audit Secure. When I was first introduced to her, I was asking her about her job and what she did, and she introduced us to Audit Secure. But I want to hear your story, how you define it and why it matters for us today.
Yeah, so Lisa has said this, and I've loved this, and I've used it so many times, is you can't always be audit proof. You can be audit secure. In other words, and people that are watching this on video see my arms coming together, right? You want to close the gaps as much as you reasonably can. You cannot do everything right and still, I'm sorry, you can do everything right and still have an employee disagree with you. You can still get an EEOC charge. You can still get an audit or a corporate audit question. You can still have a lawyer challenge to the decision. Documentation is not a force field, but when somebody asks what happened, there is a world of difference between saying, I think we talked about that, and saying, here's the email, here's the warning, here are the notes, and here's the decision and why we made it.
Yeah, and I think what Lisa says, and she gives us a checklist of, one, having that reasonable basis. Why did we make the decision that we made? Like what authority were we using to make that decision? And then always she always talks about the rules of three, right? The rules of three, making sure that we're looking at three different things. And then proactively having standard operating procedures or having a checklist that we follow. So when these things come up, it's not a mystery to us. That's why I love checklists, because I can be proactive and create the checklist. And then when the situation comes up, I'm not in that panic, that fight or flight mode. I can go, oh, here's the checklist, Chuck. Let's go through it and make sure I'm getting everything that I need to do. And then have that really well documented. Like, look, this is what's happening in there.
Yeah. So, John, we beat the documentation thing up a little bit. So I want to kind of just get to the meat of the matter of what we are doing. What I don't want people to miss. So it would be easy to make this sound like document everything so lawyers can defend you later. That's part of it. But here's the deal. It's about making the workplace better. You're like, how does that make the workplace better? That's our whole thing here in the HR Stories podcast. Making the workplace better, because documentation creates clarity, consistency, accountability, and fairness.
Mic drop, folks. Mic drop. Yeah, I mean, I think that's important, right? And so again, I think it goes back to, how do we make the workplace better? And it's a tool that every single HR person has been using for centuries, maybe not centuries, but using it for decades. And it does make the workplace better when it's not a burden to managers. Just throwing it out there.
And here's the flip side. I want people to understand documentation is not just about documenting what the employee did wrong. What? I thought you've been talking about documenting employees that aren't. Yes, you are correct. But it's not just about documenting what the employee did wrong. It documents what we did. Did we communicate? Did we follow up? Did we offer the benefit? Did we consider the accommodation? Did we explain the expectations? Documentation holds management and HR accountable too.
And I'm going to jump in here, Chuck, because I think one of the things that it's not just about employee did it wrong, but when they did it right, we want to document that as well. Right. And did we reward them? And did we accommodate them? And did we let them know? And did we do all those things? Because you do not want to have an employee file that just has bad stuff in it. Because I'm going to open it up and I'm going to be like, you're telling me that this employee has never done anything good in their 3 years when they've been working for you, Chuck.
Yeah, exactly. So we've kind of beat this up a little bit, and about the clarity and the consistency, and I want to kind of go down to the next final wrap up here. One of the things that I've said and you've said before is, if it's not written down, it didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
And documentation is not about bureaucracy. Uh, it's clarity, and clarity helps people know where they stand. So let's close this out if we can. Can you work with me on this? Want to go down, go on down to the funnel, bottom of the funnel here,
Yeah.
and
Tell me,
closing out. Yeah,
where are you?
documentation. Yeah, documentation is a better workplace tool. Bringing it down to the bottom here,
Yeah.
documentation, better workplace tool. You may never see a courtroom. Hopefully you will not, right? Hopefully you're not. But someday, corporate HR, an auditor, an EOC, an attorney, a lot of times you can be talking to your attorneys, right? Or even you 6 months from now thinking, what did I do? What did I say? You're going to ask, how did we handle this? So I'm going to wrap up my documentation diatribe here, and then I'll let you close us out on this episode of the HR Stories podcast. So, John, as I described at the beginning, and I've had this happen before, there are few better feelings in HR than being able to say, I've got it right here. Oh, it just makes me so giddy, right? It makes me giddy, but the bigger win is that the employee knew what was happening too. You showed you were more organized. You showed you were more, you kind of with it. Good documentation protects the company, yes, but great documentation creates that clarity, consistency, accountability, and fairness. And that, John Thalheimer, leadership guru, is how I think we make the workplace better.
I
Take
like
us
that.
home.
I know. I like that. I really think that's a good kind of way to kind of sum up the session today, the podcast today. And, it seems simple that it's a tool that we use, documentation, but we don't think about it as a better workplace tool. We think about it as a compliance tool. But
Yeah.
it can be, when we do it well, be a good workplace tool. And I had to laugh when you said, what were the words? Even you forget 6 months later, right? Because that's me. I do something,
Yeah.
and I really catch myself even today. I'll write something down, and I'll talk about something, and I'll do something, and I'll think to myself, am I going to remember that next week? Or when I come back from vacation, am I going to remember that? And then I'm like, no, because I have in mind like a sieve. And so then I'll go and like, okay, I need to take a note for myself. I need to document that. And then that collection of documents, right, becomes this really important thing. And it does make our workplace better in the long term, right? And so just doing that consistently and fairly becomes a really good kind of history too, kind of history of your time in that company and what you did and what you did well. So I think that's it. I'm going to end there, Chuck. And I want to thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where podcast where there is a good workplace in every story.